The classroom fell silent as the new substitute teacher walked in, her small frame and gentle demeanor immediately drawing skeptical glances from the rowdy high school students. At barely 5 feet tall with soft-spoken words, Mrs. Chen looked like she might struggle to handle even the most well-behaved class. Little did they know that behind her quiet exterior lay years of explosive ordnance disposal training, combat deployment experience, and nerves of steel forged in the most dangerous situations imaginable. When a real emergency would strike that very afternoon, these students were about to discover that sometimes the most unassuming heroes carry the heaviest secrets. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Jefferson High School as Sarah Chen adjusted her modest cardigan and smoothed down her conservative skirt. At 42 years old, she stood barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, her delicate features framed by wire-rimmed glasses that gave her an almost scholarly appearance. The principal had warned her about this particular class, 11th grade chemistry with a reputation for eating substitute teachers alive. As she organized her materials with methodical precision, Sarah's movements carried a subtle efficiency that went unnoticed by the casual observer. Each item found its exact place on the desk, arranged with the kind of spatial awareness that comes from years of handling equipment where millimeter precision meant the difference between life and death. The first students began trickling in, their conversations dying to whispers as they sized up their new target. Jake Morrison, the self-appointed class clown, slouched into his seat with exaggerated drama. "Great, another pushover sub," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. His comment drew snickers from his friends, who had already begun planning their disruption strategy. Sarah heard I word but maintained her calm demeanor, continuing to write the day's objectives on the whiteboard with steady, controlled strokes. Her handwriting was precise, almost military in its uniformity, though none of the students recognized the significance of such attention to detail. As the bell rang and the classroom filled with the usual chaos of teenagers settling into their seats, Sarah turned to face her audience with a gentle smile that somehow commanded attention without raising her voice. "Good morning, class. I'm Mrs. Chen, and I'll be your substitute teacher today." Her voice carried a quiet authority that made several students pause their side conversations. There was something about her posture, perfectly straight, shoulders squared, that suggested she was accustomed to command situations, though she delivered her words with the patience of someone who understood that respect was earned, not demanded. When Tommy Patterson deliberately knocked his textbook to the floor with a loud crash, expecting the typical flustered response from a substitute teacher, Sarah simply nodded acknowledgement and continued with her introduction, her composure unshakable. The lesson began with a discussion of chemical reactions, and Sarah's knowledge quickly became apparent. She didn't just recite facts from the textbook, she explained concepts with the kind of deep understanding that comes from practical application. When discussing combustion reactions, her examples were unusually specific. She described the precise temperature thresholds and chemical compositions with an accuracy that made even the most disinterested students pay attention. "The key to understanding any explosive reaction," she explained while writing molecular formulas with perfect precision, "is recognizing that it's all about controlled energy release. The difference between a useful reaction and a dangerous often comes down to timing, environment, and respect for the materials you're working with." As the class progressed, subtle signs of Sarah's background began to emerge for those observant enough to notice. When a student accidentally knocked over a beaker of water, Sarah's reaction was instantaneous. She moved with fluid efficiency to contain the spill, her movements economical and practiced. Her spatial awareness was exceptional. She seemed to know exactly where every student was positioned at all times, and when walking between desks, she maintained clear sight lines to all exits. These weren't the reflexes of a typical educator, but rather the ingrained habits of someone trained to assess and respond to threats in high-pressure environments. The morning's biggest disruption came when Marcus Williams decided to test the new substitute's limits by setting off a small firecracker he had smuggled into class. The sharp crack echoed through the room as students jumped and laughed, expecting to see Mrs. Chen startled or angry. Instead, Sarah's response was remarkable in its controlled intensity. Rather than panic or shout, she moved with lightning speed toward the source of the sound, her body automatically shifting into a tactical stance that spoke of extensive training. For just a moment, her gentle facade slipped, revealing glimpses of someone accustomed to life or death decisions involving explosive devices. She identified the harmless nature of Marcus's prank within seconds, but her initial reaction had been that of a professional trained to respond to potential threats with deadly seriousness. The afternoon brought an unexpected test that would reveal the true depth of Sarah Chen's hidden expertise. During fifth period, the fire alarm began blaring with an urgency that immediately set Sarah's training into high alert mode. Unlike the routine drills the students were accustomed to, this alarm carried the distinctive pattern of a genuine emergency. As teenage hachis began their usual casual evacuation shuffle, Sarah's enhanced hearing picked up something that made her blood run cold, the faint but unmistakable ticking sound coming from the storage closet near the back of the classroom. Her years of explosive ordnance disposal training had taught her to recognize the acoustic signature of various timing devices, and what she heard now triggered every alarm in her professionally trained mind. While students continued their leisurely exodus, Sarah moved swiftly toward the sound source, her demeanor shifting from mild-mannered teacher to tactical expert in a matter of seconds. The closet door was slightly ajar, and peering inside, she identified what appeared to be a suspicious package with visible wiring and a digital display counting down from 3 minutes and 47 seconds. This was no drill, no student prank. This was a genuine explosive device that threatened the lives of everyone in the building. In that moment, Sarah's military training overrode every civilian instinct, and she began implementing protocols learned during her 8-year career as an Army EOD specialist, experience that included 3 combat deployments and countless life-threatening situations. "Everyone out now." Sarah's voice carried a command authority that instantly transformed the casual evacuation into urgent action. Students who had never heard anything but gentle tones from their substitute teacher suddenly found themselves responding to orders delivered with military precision. She positioned herself between the device and the fleeing students, using her body as a shield while rapidly assessing the bomb's construction. Her trained eyes identified the components, a relatively simple timing device connected to what appeared to be commercial explosives, crude but potentially lethal in the confined space of a classroom. With 2 minutes and 18 seconds remaining on the timer, Sarah faced the same type of decision that had defined her military career: attempt to disarm the device or ensure complete evacuation and accept the inevitable destruction. Drawing upon muscle memory developed through hundreds of training scenarios and real-world situations, Sarah began the delicate process of bomb disposal. Her hands moved with the steady precision that had earned her commendations during her service years, when she had successfully disabled improvised explosive devices in combat zones where failure meant not just her own death, but the deaths of her fellow soldiers. She identified the primary circuit, traced the power source, and located the safest interruption point while maintaining constant awareness of the decreasing time display. The students, now safely evacuated to the hallway, watched in stunned silence as their fragile substitute teacher demonstrated expertise that spoke of a hidden life far removed from lesson plans and homework assignments. With 37 seconds remaining, Sarah made the final cut that disabled the device's timing mechanism, her training allowing her to maintain steady hands despite the life-threatening pressure. As the digital display went dark, she carefully examined the now safe explosive to ensure no secondary triggers remained active. Only after completing her full safety assessment did she finally allow herself to acknowledge the magnitude of what had just occurred. The students who had spent the morning underestimating their substitute teacher now stared in awe at someone who had just saved their lives, using skills they never could have imagined. When police and bomb squad officials arrived minutes later, they found Sarah calmly explaining the device's construction with technical precision that immediately identified her as a trained professional and not a lucky amateur. The revelation of Sarah Chen's background as a decorated Army EOD specialist transformed not only how her students viewed her, but how they understood the concept of service and sacrifice. In the days that followed, they learned that their quiet substitute teacher had spent years defusing bombs in Afghanistan and Iraq, protecting countless lives through her expertise and courage. She had chosen education as her second career specifically because she wanted to continue serving others, though she never expected her military skills to be needed in a high school chemistry classroom. Her students realized they had been in the presence of a genuine hero, someone whose unassuming exterior concealed years of the most dangerous military service imaginable. Sarah Chen's story reminds us that heroes walk among us every day, often hidden behind ordinary faces in everyday occupations. From the grocery store clerk who served as a combat medic to the quiet librarian who flew reconnaissance missions, our communities are filled with veterans whose extraordinary service remains largely invisible to those around them. These men and women chose to dedicate years of their lives to protecting others, developing skills and facing dangers that most of us can barely imagine, and they deserve our recognition and respect. The next time you encounter someone whose calm competence seems to exceed their apparent role, remember Sarah's story. That substitute teacher, that maintenance worker, that soft-spoken neighbor might be carrying within them years of training, sacrifice, and service that shaped them into the steady, reliable people they are today. Their military experience taught them not just technical skills, but values of duty, honor, and selfless service that continue to benefit their communities long after they've hung up their uniforms. If Sarah Chen's incredible story of hidden heroism and life-saving courage inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of everyday heroes whose military service prepared them for moments when ordinary people needed extraordinary help. Honor our veterans by sharing their stories, and remember that the greatest heroes are often those who serve without seeking recognition. Hit that notification bell to never miss stories of the brave men and women who continue serving their communities with the same dedication they once showed their country.